Tom, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. I'm really excited that, we've been able to develop a relationship, over the last year or so, and super excited about what you're building at Tombot. It's super cool. Exactly. It looks even more realistic. It just moved. That's incredible. It looks even more realistic in person than it does on the pictures.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. But yeah, tell me a little bit about how you got started with this.
Sure. So my background, I've been in the high tech world. She's waking up here. I'll talk about you in a moment. My background is I've been in the high tech world for over 30 years. My two Tombot co-founders and I built a prior startup into one of the world's largest litigation automation companies. We had clients and operations on 3 continents. It was a pretty exciting time for us. We were successfully acquired in 2011, which gave me the freedom to think about other things. Unfortunately, that same year, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. And right away, I had to step into her life and start making really tough decisions for her. The first was coming to terms with she could no longer live by herself. My parents had split up when I was a teenager, and while my dad got remarried, my mother never did, and really prided herself on her independent living. But she had become a hoarder. It stopped being a clean and safe place for her. So moving in a professional caregiver corrected that, but really was upsetting to my mom. Big time invasion of her privacy. The second tough decision I had to make on her behalf was taking away her car keys. Every time I saw her car, there was more body damage on it. And of course, it was never her fault. And that was a big deal because suddenly now she not only has somebody living with her, she has to ask permission for that person to go anywhere. But neither of those decisions compared to the third decision I had to make, which was rehoming her dog. She had a 2-year-old Goldendoodle puppy who she managed to train to be aggressive towards her caregiver. She was very unhappy about that caregiver. Caregiver would walk into a room, the dog would growl, somehow sensing my mother's unhappiness with her presence, and my mom would laugh and pet the dog, reinforcing that behavior. And pretty soon, the caregiver or anybody else couldn't move safely around the house. We successfully found a new home for that dog, and it lived out its years in a very happy spot. But my mother was furious with me. Every day was, where's my dog? Why can't I have my dog? When am I getting my dog back? I went from being the number one son and only son in her life to being the number one villain in her life. I looked around for substitutes for live animal companions. She hated everything that I brought home. And it was at that time I realized that there was a fairly large gap in the market. That launched me on what became a multi-year research and education journey, culminating in a master's degree from Stanford University. And along the way, I learned that my mom's story is shared by well over 300 million seniors with dementia or pre-dementia mild cognitive impairment, and quite literally half the households in the world. Half the households of the 2 billion households, 1 billion, do not keep live animals as pets for reasons including health adversity, cost, burden of care, or living restriction. And so we launched Tombot to be in service to those people.
Wow, that's an incredible story. How is your mother now, by the way?
My mom passed away in late 2018.
Sorry to hear that.
When I began working on robots for her, it really changed the dynamic in our relationship. And as she progressed into late dementia, she couldn't remember what she had for breakfast in a given day, but she always remembered I was working on robots for her as what she wanted to talk about every time we saw each other.
Wow, that's amazing. I actually have a grandmother currently who's going through dementia. She's 93 years old, and it's fascinating what they do remember. Obviously, they don't remember much once it gets to a certain stage, but the things that they do, it's incredible because it doesn't seem like there's a pattern that you can, latch on to. But that's incredible that she was able to remember that you were building these bots inspired by her.
The brain is a fascinating thing, and we're just learning now, uncovering more about the changes that happen through Alzheimer's and other diseases that lead to dementia. But different types of memories appear to be stored differently. So innocuous memories, like what you had for breakfast, or what you were supposed to do that day, or where you set your keys down, that ability to retain that may slip away, may even fairly dramatically for somebody with dementia. But emotional memories tend to persist. One of the therapies for people with dementia are music from earlier in their lifetime, where it generates memories of that time, because we oftentimes associate emotionally positive memories with music or older movies or looking at pictures of loved ones, and recall them perfectly, but still don't have the short-term memory recall. And it's actually been very important in our development of our product is the whole emotional attachment bias, because that memory seems to persist longer than does, once again, like a set of keys.
Mm. You mentioned it was about 300 people who shared similar experiences as your mother, at least if I heard correctly.
300 million.
300 million, yes. Yeah. 300 million people who shared that. Can you tell me a little bit more about the research that you uncovered going through this process?
Sure. This is a very well-researched area. So seniors with dementia frequently suffer from something called behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia, or BPSD symptoms. Those include loneliness. I'm sure our engineers programmed her to go to sleep every time I talk. Wake up. So these behavioral and psychological symptoms include loneliness, depression, anxiety, delirium, in my mother's case, hallucinations and violent anger. To manage these symptoms, doctors historically have relied upon psychotropic medications. These are anti-anxiety, antidepressant, antipsychotic medications. And for people like you or me, we tolerate those medications fairly well, but they're particularly hard on the elderly. So much so that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services now prohibit their use in long-term care under most circumstances. So the tools that we've historically relied upon to manage these people and keep them safe are no longer available. Peer-reviewed studies show that where a senior with dementia can form a robust emotional attachment to an object, traditionally that's a human baby doll or a stuffed animal, that senior gets a great deal of relief from their behavioral and psychological symptoms and a corresponding reduction in need for those psychotropic medications. The problem is most seniors don't care for those traditional objects. Research on robotic animals show they significantly outperform the traditional objects and have the added benefit of reducing pain and the need for pain medications. But the problem there, however, is existing technologies are either simple children's toys, which have been rebranded for seniors, which after the novelty effect wears off are generally of little interest, or on the other end of the spectrum are prohibitively expensive robots. This whole space was invented in the early 2000s by a Japanese research institute. They created a robotic seal by the name of Paro, P-A-R-O. It's a good robot, but it costs over $6,000. Most senior care facilities can't afford one, let alone individuals like my mother who need one for themselves. And so our mission became to develop a better emotional attachment object, one that consistently stimulates enduring emotional attachment, but would also be available at a price that many seniors and their families can afford, even before we have healthcare insurance reimbursements in place.
Mm. I'm curious about what's the connection between, I guess, a robotic animal and its key characteristics that aid in emotional attachment for these dementia patients.
It's a great question. I had the benefit while I was at Stanford to look at a lot of research around Alzheimer's and other causes to dementia, but also around emotional attachment and just robots that have existed previously. And all of these areas are extremely well studied. There's been a lot of not just here in the United States, but a lot of money that's been poured into research because this is a problem that's not unique to the U.S. society, but every developed nation has an aging issue where there are more people aging that need care than there are young people to take care of them. And it's actually even more severe in Asian countries such as Japan or South Korea than it is here, in part because we still have quite a big immigration policy population. We have new people that are coming into the country who can take those jobs where some of these more closed societies don't, and young people with educations don't really want these jobs. So there is a tremendous amount of research that's been done. We conducted 3 rounds of studies with over 700 seniors with dementia, and there were a number of hypotheses that we looked at. But the very first hypothesis that we looked at was that seniors with dementia would prefer objects that move over objects that don't move. As I wanted to understand why robotic animals might be more successful than a stuffed animal or a human baby doll. And 100% of the seniors with dementia where they could still indicate a preference, and we couldn't rely on verbal information. These were all observed behaviors. We worked with Georgia Tech and the University of Illinois to develop coding methodologies to help us understand behaviors and try to quantify those when they were interacting with different objects. And quite literally 100% of seniors with dementia preferred objects that moved over objects that didn't move. So that helped me in the first place understand that stuffed animals or static objects were not going to be successful. But we would hear things like, gee, I think my grandson would enjoy playing with this, or maybe my great-granddaughter would like it, because the objects that we were working with were toys. My mother never walked down the toy aisle at Target shopping for herself. And so we realized that toy-like appearance was going to be a problem. So the next round of customer studies, we began working with Jim Henson's Creature Shop, the people behind Muppets and Sesame Street. And they helped us create high-fidelity robotic animals that looked different. And we wanted to understand how people would prefer the appearance of the robot and start to relate to it themselves. And in that, 96% preferred a realistic robotic animal to a cartoon-like, think Disney, so oversized eyes and nose and ears. And 100% preferred that to the leading toy-like one. So where they realized it wasn't a toy, it was something that was more realistic in appearance. Very, very strong preference. But we would hear objections like, well, it doesn't move very naturally. It looks kind of strange. And the idea there was, or the conclusion there is that if we didn't have a robot that moved as realistically as it looked, there would be some kind of cognitive dissonance. It could have been the phenomenon of the uncanny valley, which may be familiar to many people. It's the idea that we would prefer things that are increasingly realistic until they get really close, and then they get creepy until they're perfectly realistic and indistinguishable, and then we like them again. And that gap is called the uncanny valley. Our hypothesis coming out of our second round was that we could clear that uncanny valley by having something that not only looked realistic, but also behaved realistically. And this, Jennie, here, this is our 5th generation customer study prototype. As far as we know, she is the world's most realistic robotic animal, both in terms of appearance and in behaviors. And she was loved. And so I've been in product development, product innovation my entire career. The 2 most important metrics for product innovation are product market fit. Product market fit, I like to borrow the Andreessen Horowitz definition, which is solving a serious customer problem in a way that they love. For us, it's literally love the robot, not love like you love your coffee maker, but literally fall in love with this product, care about its well-being, want to keep track of it all the time, have it close to you at all times, just like you might with a real pet. And then the second metric is minimum viable product. And the way we achieve that is we define product market fit through those initial trials, and then iterated with inferior products until we got to the point where our minimum viable product actually met the criteria for product market fit. And that's what this is. But this product, even though she looks great and performs great and snores very loudly, she is very fragile, can't survive everyday use, can't pass any of the many safety certifications that we need to get. And lastly, can't be manufactured efficiently in large numbers. She's more of an artisan product. So we had to completely re-engineer the product from the ground up. That's what I'm holding here. This is what Jennie looks like without her cut fur or other cosmetics on it. But this is a complete re-engineering of this robot designed to survive everyday use, pass all of the safety certifications, and then be something that we can manufacture efficiently at scale.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the safety certifications and what they're looking for exactly?
Sure. There are a variety of them. We have the basic ones like United Laboratories, a UL certification. The equivalent in Europe is called the CE certification. Different countries have their own safety standards. Some look to the United States or Europe. If we've got those certifications, those are good enough. Others will have their own. And they're basically just protecting the user from being injured by the robot. For children's usage, as an example, the robot has to be usable in the way that it's going to be used, including dropping the robot, without having small parts pop off of it that could end up being choking hazards. Can't have any hazardous chemicals that are in the fur. Can't have fire risk. This is an electronic device, which means there's power flowing through it all the time, battery power. And in theory, these things can catch fire. So what do you do to mitigate the starting of fire and stop it from turning into a full-blown fire within the robot? And then there's just basic usability. Can it survive having water dumped on it? What if you superheat it or put it in a freezer? What if you put an enormous amount of pressure on it? What is the robot capable of surviving those things? And so those are all kinds of testing that we have to pass in order to get the safety certifications to bring the product to market.
Understood. Thank you for that context. It's so funny because it's so realistic. It's turning over, you're petting it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. This is so good. It's making the noises. Can you take us through, I guess, the full feature set that you guys have built into Jennie or the Tombot?
Absolutely. Easier to talk about this one since she's moving so much. But there are 5 mechanical subsystems in the robot. The mouth opens and closes, but not just open and close as you watch on her, have that fine expressiveness that dogs have with their mouth. The eyes open and close, the eyebrows lift, the ears move. You can probably see it on her. She's looking around, finding things that interest her. She'll perk up her ears. The head and neck not only give that tremendous range of motion, but also the fine expressiveness that we're used to with dogs, particularly when they're trying to understand something we're saying. And then, of course, the tail wags. So those 5 mechanical subsystems. The robot is covered with sensors. She can feel how and where she's being touched. She can tell the difference between a simple touch, a slow caress, a vigorous pet, and being held. She has microphones on her and responds to voice commands. We come with a smartphone app that allows for a number of configuration settings, including naming the robot or renaming the robot. And then once renamed, she'll only respond to that given name. She can feel herself being moved, as I roll her over from time to time as to stimulate her. but she knows if she's picked up, she shouldn't thrash around and risk being dropped. She has a light sensor, so if it's dark in a room, she knows not to bark, and a variety of other sensors to help her understand her environment, make an inference about what that might mean, and then exhibit a behavior from a category of behaviors that are consistent with that context. And part of our intellectual property is the potential for having unlimited categories of behaviors and unlimited behaviors within a given category. So the user is unlikely to ever experience a sense of repetition. That's another part of realism. If you're seeing something do the same actions over and over again, particularly for the same inputs, that sort of breaks the illusion of reality. So I can give her the same inputs over and over again, and she won't respond twice in the same way.
And why is that important, Tom?
So one of the things that we learned early on in our studies, we were very concerned about the ethics of tricking a senior with dementia, saying, oh, it's a real puppy, take care of this real puppy. We never wanted to do that. We always wanted to explain that it's a robotic pet. And what we learned is that they actually prefer that it's a robot to a real dog. Pet ownership rates in the United States peak when we're in our 50s and then decline by about 50% per decade after that. The time we get to our 90s, very few people own live pets anymore. But they still like to pretend, just like you or I might go to the movies and emotionally immerse within the action that's going on in that movie and, laugh or cry, whatever emotions they're triggering. The seniors like to pretend that the robot is real. They immerse in that illusion. And anything that kind of tears them out of that is really unsatisfying. So having her respond like a real dog in a way that doesn't remind them of a mechanical device is part of that illusion, part of that suspending of disbelief that makes the product have enduring emotional appeal.
Excellent. And then just quick question. You mentioned that it was battery powered.
Yes.
According to you all's testing at the moment, how long does the actual battery last?
So it's designed to last all day under typical use. So once again, dogs typically sleep 20 out of 24 hours a day. So we expect our robot's going to do something similar. But during the time when it is awake, it's going to be pretty active. So think smartphone, similar processor, similar memory, similar battery type and battery life. So she's designed to last all day under single charge and then be plug-in rechargeable overnight. In the future, we'll offer an optional accessory like the bed that she's on here. And if she's simply placed on it, she'll wirelessly recharge.
That's amazing, because I was curious whether or not, given the dementia condition, whether or not that would be difficult to remember to charge the dog or anything like that. But the wireless charger seems to be.
So a couple quick points to that. So that was something that was a concern for us too. When somebody is diagnosable with dementia, so not pre-dementia mild cognitive impairment. Mild cognitive impairment means greater than age-related cognitive decline. After we get to a certain age, not you yet, but certainly me, our cognitive we go into cognitive decline. That's a normal part of aging. But where it's disease caused, whether it's Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or perhaps a stroke, it's greater than age-related cognitive decline, but they're not yet diagnosable as having dementia. Somebody who has pre-dementia mild cognitive impairment is still capable of living on their own. In many cases, you could have a conversation with them and not ever know that they're having any kind of cognitive issues. But once they're diagnosable with dementia, they're no longer safe to live independently. 83% of seniors with dementia live at home and are cared for by an unpaid family member. The balance are either living at home with a professional caregiver or living in assisted living or memory care environments. So it becomes the role of the caregiver to make sure that the robot is safely used and maintained, including making sure it's plugged in every night. In my mother's case, making sure she never took it into the bathroom, because you never want to submerge this in water.
Right.
And as importantly, keeping it away from the dining table, because my mom fed her her prototype chocolate pudding. And that we learned that's something we're going to have to clean off a robot. So there is another person or people that are in the environment that will make sure that the robot is successfully managed, because we can't rely on the senior with dementia to remember to plug it in. And if it runs out of power, that could feel like the puppy is dying. So we don't want to have that circumstance. The other issue that came up in our early part of our studies is whether the robot should walk or not. Obviously, a walking robot can have a lot of appeal, and there are, walking robots out there that are very, very cute. For a senior with dementia, however, due to that cognitive impairment, there's a greater fall risk for them, and anything on the ground presents an unnecessary fall risk. So products in this category are designed to never be placed on the ground. They're designed to lay comfortably on the person's lap or on a table or chair close by, somewhere where they can remain in close contact, but never on the ground. And so there was no benefit to having any kind of ability to stand up or walk in the legs. That saved us quite a bit of cost and weight to the robot.
I love the amount of detail and thought you all have put into the design of this dog. It's incredible, actually, the attention to detail that you all have instilled into your design. And I'm completely just blown away by this, to be honest.
Well, thank you. I could claim all the credit, but that would be just completely wrong. We've been helped by literally thousands of people on this journey. The seniors themselves, their family members, professional caregivers, doctors, academic researchers, and people working not only in senior care environments, but also in hospitals. And everybody is, made some kind of contribution, large or small. And without them, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today.
Absolutely. So in the case of my grandmother, who's 93 with dementia, my mother, who is 70 years old, who is her primary caretaker as she's living at home with her, if I was to purchase Jennie or, one of her litter, and place this robot in my grandmother's hands, what should I expect to see from my grandmother in terms of her behavior, how long it takes her to bond with the dog, any typical interactions that happen that you've noticed over the course of observing some of these individuals?
So, wonderful question. Best practices for introducing the robot. That's of critical importance. So you remember the very first thing is that this is an emotional attachment object. We don't want them to say, oh, here's another thing for you, mom or grandma. This is something for you to love. Because I was giving my mother puppies, she associated her emotional attachment with me to these robotic pets that I was providing her. So we're still developing the details of best practices for interaction, but that's a really important part of it. Making sure that introduction is coming from a place of love and not say, hey, mom, I'm too busy for you. Here, just be distracted by this thing and I'll be back in a little while. We want to kind of reinforce all of the sort of emotional elements that we can, so that emotional attachment occurs. Now, what we have found when that happens are a number of behaviors that are consistent with emotional attachment. So some of the things like, do they look at it? Do they touch it? Do they pick it up? Do they hold it? Do they talk to it? Do they talk to other people about it? But probably the most important one, reaction, smiling. And this is from people that may not smile frequently anymore. And that's really the most heartwarming thing, is where you get somebody that, has really been terribly unhappy for whatever reason. Many seniors with dementia go through pretty profound personality changes. My mother was a special education teacher, worked with visual and auditory disabled children. Kind of person that would do anything for anybody. Also the kind of person that would ask anybody to do anything for them too. It's sort of the world that I grew up with. and never say a bad word about anybody. And as dementia took hold of her Alzheimer's took hold, she became mean and nasty and vindictive, really very hurtful. Because whatever was bothering her, she would voice that, and real or imagined, that would be what came out of her mouth. And unfortunately, a lot of it was imagined. But by having the robotic puppy, something that she could love and that she could associate with me, changed her dramatically. Now, she still had episodes, but they were far less frequent. Didn't need the same medications any longer, and smiled a lot, which was something I grew up with. Oh, just a genuinely happy human being, and it was just such a gift for her to, to have some of those moments again, where she had real joy.
Absolutely. So how should I think about this robot, given that it appears to have so many health benefits for these individuals who are enduring dementia? Should I think of it as a consumer device, or would this fall into the category of a medical device? What's the proper perspective?
It's a great question. We are fortunate to fall into both categories. So we can be sold as a non-regulated wellness device. Think Apple smartwatch or Fitbit or Oura Ring. But we also aim to be the first puppies to be FDA medical devices. And there are a couple of reasons for us to do that. One is that we want to be sold through hospitals. We know that we can move the needle in the hospital environment in terms of how these patients with mental or substance use disorder are treated. And it also sets up the potential for having healthcare reimbursements from the Centers for Medicare, Medicaid Services, as well as from the private Medicare Advantage and other insurers. And so we actually are a two-prong product. Our first product will be the consumer device, and then we'll come out with the FDA version shortly afterwards.
And what's the pathway you all need to take to gain FDA approval for this device? Or is there already a similar device to receive FDA approval that you all can use as a reference?
So very important question. A little over a decade ago, the U.S. Congress ordered the FDA to deregulate products that were obviously safe for use, and allow them to bypass the approval process. And so we are considered a Class 2 neurological therapeutic feedback device that is 510K exempt. 510K is a pre-market approval process that we are exempt from having to do that. We still have to comply with all the other FDA regulations for making sure that it complies with the safety and the design, as well as good manufacturing practices that allow us to always keep track of our supply chain and our quality control systems. So all of that is fairly rigorous, but we don't have to do clinical trials before we can sell it as an FDA medical device. So it's an easier path than for many products because it's obviously a safe product.
Have you gone into production? Are you still in prototype? If so, how many other Jennies are out here at the moment? And tell us a little bit more about the price point, things of that sort.
You bet. So we finished the research and development phases. We're now into production preparation, and there are three preparatory phases to actually getting these products out the door. The first is called EVT, or engineering, validation, and testing. EVT is where we go through the product requirements documents in fine detail and make sure that the product is fully functioning and compliant with all the specifications that we designed in the R&D phases. That will take us through the first of the year to complete that process. Through the first of 2025. We'll then enter what's called design validation and testing. That's where the robot is essentially ready to go, but it hasn't been rigorously tested. And so DVT is where you try to break the robot. And so the drop tests, the pressure tests, the water tests, the freezing, the heating, all, once again, finding ways to break the robot that we didn't think about or test during the R&D phases, and then whatever engineering might be required to correct for any deficiencies that emerge in that testing. And then once that's done, you enter production validation testing. At that stage, the robot itself is done, and you're just working on the production lines, making sure that the processes are consistent and producing, high quality with very little variation from one robot to the next, and going along efficiently enough that that you can keep your costs in line with what your forecasts are. That'll take us into 2025. We're hoping for first customer shipments sometime in the second half of 2025.
Okay, so first customers meaning there's a pre-order list.
That's right. We have close to 7,500 pre-order and waitlist customers now, which include over 200 B2B customers.
Really?
Those B2Bs are hospitals, assisted living, memory care communities, skilled nursing facility operators. And so we're very pleased to have a great variety of customers that we can help regardless of where they are. So the senior who lives at home in a private residence, the senior who's living in assisted living or memory care, or sadly, these people also find themselves frequently in acute care hospitals. And so having products available to help make a difference in their recovery from a serious illness or injury.
Excellent. And if you don't mind me asking, are these payment pending, or have you already received revenue from these?
So we did a test campaign on Kickstarter a few years ago just to make sure that people actually wanted to buy the product. We sold out of our least expensive units in about 7 hours. And so that was pretty gratifying until we realized we still didn't have any idea when we were going to ship the robot. So we kept that campaign very short and then opened up a wait list on our website, and that's what's grown to close to 7,500 customers. That's not robots, but customers.
Customers, got it. Excellent. Thank you for that clarification. Sure. So to be able to go through the process you just laid out, what is it that you need at the moment? What are you looking for at the moment in terms of a fundraise or resources that will enable you to go through this roadmap to end up delivering to first customers ultimately?
Because we're a robot, we are capital intensive, particularly compared to a software only type of product. This is both hardware and a lot of software that's on the robot. We've raised over $10 million to date. We're raising another $3.5 million to take us through those 3 phases of production preparation, as well as shipping our first 2,500 or so robots. At that point, we'll be cash flow positive. And once we're financially stable there, we'll go out to raise a much larger round to scale production, scale customer acquisition, and begin research and development on our next products.
I am curious quickly before we move on. As you mentioned, hardware, software, when it comes to Jennie and the Tombot, I'm sure a lot of coding, algorithmic creativity within the software. Do you see any further or future iteration where you leverage some of the new artificial intelligence capabilities that have come out?
Absolutely. So there's limited machine learning capability in this product. We didn't need it in a full-fledged mode, once again, to be the minimum viable product for senior with dementia. But part of our customer community today includes puppies that have been ordered on behalf of children with autism and other disabilities, adolescents with severe anxiety, major depressive disorder, suicide risk, adults with PTSD, bipolar, schizophrenia, substance use disorder, and adults and seniors who live alone and are at risk of social isolation and severe loneliness. We wanted our first product to be focused on seniors with dementia, but there's a huge number of people that we potentially can help. And we do anticipate developing much more advanced technologies so that people that have higher demands of realism and higher demands of monitoring, safety and health monitoring capability, we're able to deliver those products and services to them.
Excellent. And then given all of the sensors and the technology that currently exists in this current iteration, are you guys collecting any data that could be useful back in a clinical setting or, for research or anything like that?
We are. Version 1.0 of our monitoring will be used for treating sundowning syndrome. Sundowning is where late in the day, the senior gets especially confused and disoriented. It's the most likely time for wandering risk and other challenging behaviors. And despite it being very common, it's poorly understood, which makes treatment have to be provided on a trial and error basis. We hope to be the first device of any kind that provides objective feedback to the caregiver and the medical provider so they can adjust that trial and error treatment, all with the goal of getting more even cognitive and emotional levels throughout the late afternoon and evenings. And then we'll expand on that. So we have sensors. We need the sensors to be a realistic robot. We have to have those sensors in place. Future versions will expand on the sensors, expand on the monitoring capability so that we provide, something that is really a robust tool for a cognitively healthy customer. My mom in late stage dementia fell and broke her leg and was admitted to the hospital. Her primary admitting diagnosis was fractured femur. Her secondary admitting diagnosis was Alzheimer's dementia. Now, for you or me, if we had exactly that same injury, maybe it's outpatient surgery, maybe we're in the hospital for a day or two or three, but pretty quickly we're discharged to get the remainder of our care from home or from outpatient services. My mom was in acute care for over 3 weeks, and then discharged from acute care to post-acute rehabilitative in-person care for another 4 weeks before she was ultimately discharged and sent home. There are 36 million annual stays in hospitals, a stay meaning an overnight stay. Approximately 30% of those stays, or about 10 million of those stays, the person has at least one of their admitting diagnosis is a mental or substance use disorder. For my mom, Alzheimer's dementia. For mental and substance use disorders, they are much longer length of stay. These people are become very challenging in many cases, challenging patient treatment situations. They stay in ERs much longer, emergency rooms or emergency departments much longer. They're much more likely to encounter hospital-caused harm because they're in the hospital so long they get secondary infections or something else that happens to them. These are some of the most expensive patients that hospitals treat. We're working with Cleveland Clinic, Children's Hospitals, HCA, who's the nation's largest health system, to look at how our robot can move the needle in that environment. And in the value-based care environment, where the hospital is set up as kind of a general contractor, and they have to pay for all of the post-discharge services that happen there, cost is everything. They want to make sure that there are no readmissions. The person's been adequately treated the first time around, but also saving money along the way. And we and our clinical study partners think that we can move the needle in that environment, and we're very excited to enter our clinical studies to demonstrate that.
Absolutely. So given this whole entire journey with Tombot was inspired by an observation you made with your mother when she was living with dementia, and for the love you had for her as her son, to give her that smile, that spark again, right, that you mentioned that she had for most of your life, and you wanted to bring that back and give her that comfort that she missed after you unfortunately had to take away her pet towards the end of her life. Now that obviously she's passed on, and again, I'm sorry for that. How do you define success with Tombot moving forward? What's your grand vision where at the end of the day, you can hang your hat on this and say, you know what, I did exactly what I intended to do, and I feel completely content with what we were able to build?
Well, it's a really important question. Anybody who starts a startup company, they're in for the most difficult journey of their professional career. You have to have some passion that fuels you day in, day out. For me, my mother gave me my new purpose. It was helping her. It was salvaging a relationship, so selfishly in that respect, but it was really helping her in a way that she was not going to get help otherwise. And one of the most fortunate things that's happened to us is the media found us. We've been covered over 400 times by major media, which has brought many, many people from around the world coming to us, telling us their stories about why this is important to them, and realizing that there's a lot more people than just my mom to help, and not just in the US, all around the world. And so we're so grateful to be in a position where we can give help. So success for us is really helping as many people as we can. We are investor funded, so we have a duty to our investors to deliver returns. But at the same time, we can be a mission-driven company that's transforming the lives of the individuals, the families, the communities that we serve. And that's really what that keeps us going 7 days a week.
Excellent, Tom. Well, again, thank you so much for the time. It was great to speak. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you build as you continue to iterate on this product.
Thank you so much.